My daughter waved through the train window while I stood on the platform, holding a ticket that no longer existed. The train had not started moving yet. That made the wave worse. Beth could see me. She could see the red error message on my phone, the conductor beside me, and my overnight bag at my feet. She smiled anyway. Then she pointed toward the station building as though I had simply forgotten something and should hurry inside to retrieve it. The doors closed. My grandchildren, Lily and Owen, pressed their palms against the glass. Lily looked confused. Owen laughed because he thought Grandma missing the train was part of the adventure. The Lakeshore Limited pulled away from Albany at 7:05 on a cold April morning. I watched the final carriage disappear around the curve. "Mrs. Turner?" the conductor said. His name badge read Leon Price. I had known a Leon Price 30 years earlier, when I worked reservations for the railroad. The young man I remembered had a narrow mustache, a habit of losing pencils, and enough confidence to announce delays before management approved the language. The conductor beside me had white hair, no mustache, and the same habit of tapping his ticket punch against his left palm. "Joanne," he said. I looked at him properly. "Leon?" We stared at each other in the strange way older people do when time has hidden a familiar face beneath an unfamiliar one. Then he looked down the track. "Was that your family?" "Apparently." He did not ask why they left me. Railroad employees understand that the platform often receives the truth after the train has committed to leaving. He asked to see my confirmation email. I had purchased 4 sleeper reservations 6 months earlier. The trip was my idea. After my husband died, I found a box of postcards from the train journey we took across the country in 1978. The cards were faded, and his handwriting tilted uphill as the days passed. Chicago, Denver, Glenwood Springs, Sacramento, San Francisco. I wanted to make the journey again with Beth and the children. Not to recreate my honeymoon. You cannot recreate a person by returning to a landscape. I wanted to give the grandchildren a memory that required looking through windows instead of down at screens. I paid $18,600 for 2 family bedrooms, meals, and a 3-night hotel stay in San Francisco. Beth and her husband, Marcus, were separated. He was supposed to join us in Chicago, but canceled 2 weeks earlier because of work. Beth said she could manage the children with me. Now she was managing them without me on a trip charged to my credit card. Leon entered my reservation number into his handheld device. "Your segment was canceled at 10:43 last night," he said. I had been asleep. By whom? The lead passenger profile. Beth's email had been listed as the group contact because she handled the children's meal requests. I paid. She controlled the itinerary. That was my first mistake. Leon scrolled. "Your accommodation was released, but the credit was applied to an upgrade on the Chicago to Emeryville segment." "Whose upgrade?" He looked at me. Beth Turner and 2 minors. She had converted my room into a larger bedroom for herself and the children. I remembered Beth insisting the smaller room would be fine because she planned to spend most of the journey in the observation car. At 10:43, the night before departure, fine became insufficient. "Can I board the next train?" I asked. Leon checked. The next westbound service left the following morning. No sleeper rooms were available to Chicago. Coach seats remained. I could reach Chicago 7 hours after Beth's train departed for the West Coast. I would not catch them. My phone rang. Beth. Leon stepped away. I answered. Mom, what happened? Her performance began with breathlessness. My reservation was canceled. That's so weird. The conductor said there was a problem, but the doors were closing. He told us you could take the next train. The conductor had said no such thing. Leon heard her through the phone and raised one eyebrow. The cancellation was made through your profile last night. Silence. Then train noise. I called customer service because the room arrangement was wrong, she said. Maybe they changed the wrong passenger. They changed the paying passenger and used her credit to upgrade you. I didn't understand that part. Why didn't you get off the train? The kids were already settled. I looked at the empty track. You waved at me. I was telling you to go to customer service. You were leaving with my grandchildren on my trip. Her voice sharpened. What was I supposed to do? Drag 2 children and 4 bags off because the railroad made a mistake? It was not the railroad's mistake. You don't know that. Leon extended his hand. I put the call on speaker. Ms. Turner, he said, this is Conductor Price. The record shows the lead passenger authenticated the account and requested removal of Joanne Turner at 10:43 p.m. The agent read back the credit transfer. The call is recorded. Beth did not speak. Would you like me to request that the train hold at Utica so you can disembark? He asked. No. The answer came immediately. Not I need to think. Not let me explain. No. The children have been looking forward to this for months, she said. So have I told her. You can fly to Chicago. And who will pay? You have the travel card. My own money was offered back to me as a solution to her theft. I ended the call. Leon brought me into the station office and made tea in a paper cup. He had 6 minutes before reporting to another platform. What are you going to do? He asked. 30 years earlier, I taught Leon how to reconstruct a broken multi-city itinerary after a snow closure. He remembered. First, I want the complete reservation history. He smiled. There's Joanne. I spent 28 years in passenger rail reservations. Most travelers believe a ticket is a simple promise. This person, that seat, one destination. Behind it sits a chain of segments, fare rules, inventory controls, payment records, service notes, and human decisions. When something goes wrong, the person who reads the chain can tell whether the problem was weather, error, or intention. Beth had assumed retirement erased that knowledge. It had not. The station supervisor printed the passenger record. The notes were clear. 10:41 p.m. Caller verified using Beth's email and the last 4 digits of my card. 10:43 p.m. Caller requested cancellation of passenger 1 due to mobility concerns and preference not to travel. 10:46 p.m. Credit applied to accommodation change for passengers 2, 3, and 4. Passenger 4 was Marcus. He had canceled 2 weeks earlier, yet his name appeared on the upgraded room. Why is Marcus still ticketed? I asked. The supervisor examined the record. His segment from Chicago to Emeryville had been reinstated 3 days earlier. Beth told me he could not travel. She had planned to meet him in Chicago. This was not a mother traveling alone with 2 children after a reservation accident. It was a family vacation from which the grandmother who paid had been removed. I telephoned Marcus. He answered after 6 rings. Joanne, is everything okay? Are you boarding in Chicago tomorrow? He paused. Beth said you decided the full trip might be too tiring. Beth canceled my room last night. She said you agreed. Did that make sense? Honestly, no, but you two sometimes change plans without telling me. That was partly true. Beth and I had a habit of discussing family logistics as though Marcus were an unreliable subcontractor. Our closeness gave her cover. I asked when Beth invited him back onto the trip. The separation had softened. They were considering reconciliation and wanted the journey to become a private family reset. My presence, Beth decided, would interfere. Then why did she keep my card attached to everything? I asked. Marcus had no answer. I told him not to board until he understood the financial arrangement. He said he would call Beth. I knew the next hour would bring pressure. Before it arrived, I secured the itinerary. I called the railroad's fraud department. Because my card paid for all segments, I could dispute changes made without authorization. I did not cancel the children's tickets. They had done nothing wrong. I did not strand Beth between stations. I froze the remaining hotel charges and removed my card from future incidentals. I also learned something useful. Every sleeper reservation remained under my travel account, even though Beth controlled the contact email. The rooms were purchased with points and a companion certificate issued in my name. Some credits could not legally be transferred to another traveler. The upgrade Beth obtained was subject to reversal. I could have ordered the railroad to move her back to the original room arrangement at the next crew change. I did not. The children were settled. Comfort was not the point I needed to make. Choice was. Beth called 5 times. On the 6th, I answered. Marcus says you're accusing me of stealing. I said you canceled my reservation and used the value. That sounds like stealing. Then perhaps the word fits without my help. We needed time as a family. I am family when the invoice arrives. That's not fair. No, it isn't. She lowered her voice because the children were nearby. I was going to pay you back for part of it. Which part? The difference after the trip. With what money? She became angry. Beth works in nonprofit communications. She's excellent at finding moral language for practical needs. She said the children had endured a difficult year. She said her marriage deserved a chance. She said I had always wanted them to reconcile. All true. None gave her the right to leave me on a platform. You could have asked me to fund a trip without me, I said. You would have said no. Probably. Exactly. That is not an argument for skipping the question. She began crying quietly. The train was approaching Utica. I could hear the announcement. Get off, I said. Come back to Albany. We will discuss how to help you and Marcus without lying to each other. I can't do that to the kids. You already did something to them. They watched you leave their grandmother behind. I told them you missed the train. They saw me standing there. The announcement repeated. Beth chose to remain aboard. That choice determined mine. I went home. The house looked strangely formal with my suitcase beside the door. On the dining table lay the box of old postcards I planned to bring. I opened the first card from Chicago. My husband had written, Joanne negotiated our room change like a union boss. I married the right woman. I laughed. Then I cried, not only because Beth betrayed me, because I had built the trip around sharing a memory nobody else asked to carry. Perhaps Beth experienced my invitation as an obligation wrapped in generosity. That possibility mattered. It did not justify what she did, but it belonged in the story. I spread the itinerary across the table: Albany to Chicago, Chicago to Emeryville, San Francisco hotel, return flight. The trip did not have to end because Beth excluded me. It did not have to continue in the form I planned either. I called Leon. He had finished his shift. "Can you find me a route that reaches Denver before they do?" He laughed. "Now you're thinking like Reservations." There was no direct sleeper availability, but there was a roomette from New York to Washington that evening, an overnight room from Washington to Chicago on a different service, and one seat on a flight from Chicago to Denver. It was absurd. It was also possible. I booked it. Not to chase Beth. To continue my own journey on a route she had not designed. I removed San Francisco from my plan and reserved 4 nights in Denver, where my college friend Ruth lived. Ruth had invited me for years. I always said the timing was wrong. The timing had finally become gloriously wrong enough. Before leaving, I sent Beth one message. The children's tickets and meals remain paid through Chicago. Beyond Chicago, my card is removed. Marcus has the choice to join and assume all remaining charges. I am safe. I will not meet you along the route. We will speak after you return. She called immediately. I turned off the phone. My new journey began at a smaller platform under a pink evening sky. Nobody waved through the window. I boarded because my name was on the passenger list. The first night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment Beth smiled from the departing train. At Baltimore, a woman boarded with a cello and spent 15 minutes negotiating where to secure it. At Washington, a porter helped me transfer my bag. At breakfast in the dining car, I met a retired dentist traveling to meet a granddaughter he had discovered through DNA testing. Train travel collects unfinished stories. Mine no longer felt uniquely humiliating. It felt unfinished. Marcus called while I waited in Chicago for the flight. He had boarded Beth's train that morning. He paid to restore his own ticket and provided a card for all remaining charges. "I almost stayed home," he said. "But the children didn't create this." I agreed. "Beth told them you changed your mind." "That lie must be corrected before they return." "I know." He apologized for accepting her story without calling me. Then he asked whether I wanted him to bring the children home at the next stop. I considered it. The trip was already in motion. Pulling the children back would turn consequence into punishment. "Continue if you pay, and if you tell them the truth in words, they can understand," I said. "What truth?" "That their mother changed my ticket without asking. I could not board, and I chose a different trip. No names, no adult details." He agreed. Beth did not. I learned later that they argued in the observation car while the children watched planes pass outside. Marcus told her reconciliation could not begin with a vacation financed by deception. He moved into the smaller roomette alone. Beth stayed with the children. They continued west together, but not as the restored family she imagined. I landed in Denver during snow. Ruth met me wearing a purple coat and holding a sign that said, "Joanne's Unscheduled Life." She had made it at the airport. We spent 4 days doing nothing from my original itinerary. We visited a textile museum. We ate green chili at a restaurant with terrible chairs. We rode a local train into the mountains, where snow made every pine branch look outlined in chalk. On the second day, Lily sent me a voice message from the observation car. "Grandma, Mom said your ticket got changed and you had to take another trip. Dad says she should have asked. Are you mad at us?" I listened twice. Then I recorded my answer. "I am not mad at you or Owen. Adults made choices. I am safe with my friend Ruth, and I want to hear everything you see. Look for a river that seems to follow the train." Lily sent photographs for the rest of the journey. A barn, a station clock, Owen asleep with his mouth open, the Colorado River appearing and disappearing beside the tracks. Our relationship survived because we did not make the children responsible for adult repair. Beth returned 12 days later. I waited 48 hours before meeting her. We sat in the same Albany Station Cafe, where I once trained new reservation agents. She looked tired. The trip had cost her and Marcus nearly $9,000 after my card was removed. The San Francisco hotel required payment at check-in. Meals beyond the ticket allowance, tours, and changes accumulated quickly. "I didn't understand how much you paid," she said. "You understood enough to move the value from my room to yours." She looked down. "I thought you'd fly out once you calmed down." "You thought I would rescue the plan." "Yes." It was the first plain answer. Beth told me the truth in pieces. She and Marcus had decided to try counseling again. Their therapist suggested time away from both families. They could not afford a private trip. My journey presented itself at exactly the wrong moment. Beth began imagining that my presence would turn every decision into a 3-person negotiation. Instead of declining, she changed the arrangement. "You would have been hurt if I said we wanted to go without you," she said. "I am hurt now, with additional paperwork." She almost smiled. Then she cried. "I watched you on the platform and knew I should get off." "Why didn't you?" "Because then I would have to admit what I did before I got anything from it." That answer was ugly and honest. "And the wave?" She covered her face. I panicked. I wanted the children to think everything was fine. They saw everything was not fine. I know. Beth repaid the transferred credit over 14 months. I did not charge interest. Marcus paid his own travel costs, not hers. Their reconciliation did not last. The trip clarified problems it could not solve. They divorced the following year, with less hostility than before. I did not become their mediator. That was another boundary born on the platform. The following summer, I took Lily and Owen on a shorter rail journey to Montreal. Beth was not invited. She was hurt. I allowed her to be hurt. The children's father signed the travel forms. Beth eventually did too. Every passenger profile used my email. Every change required a code sent to my phone. I checked the reservation more often than necessary. That vigilance eased by the second day. At the border, Owen asked why our first big trip went wrong. I told him his mother made a decision that was not hers to make, and that the adults were working on trust. "Did she steal your train?" he asked. Children reduce complexity with frightening accuracy. "She tried to use my part of it," I said. "Did you get another one?" "I did." He accepted that. Lily remembered more. She asked whether I had seen her waving from the window. "Yes." "I thought you were coming on the next train." "I know." She took my hand. We watch trees blur beside the river. Beth and I have not traveled together again. We may someday. If we do, we will each purchase our own ticket. That sounds less generous than one person paying. It may be more loving. Independence leaves fewer hidden levers. Leon retired 6 months after the Albany platform incident. At his retirement party, the staff presented him with a framed ticket punch. He invited me. During his speech, he said the railway taught him that people believe journeys are about destinations, but employees know they are about permissions. Who may board? Who may change a route? Who is expected to wait? He looked at me when he said it. After the party, he returned the passenger record I had left in the station office. Across the top, he had written in pencil, "Lead passenger." I framed that page beside one of my husband's old postcards. The postcard says, "Joanne negotiated our room change like a union boss." The passenger record says my reservation was canceled due to mobility concerns. One document remembers who I was. The other records who my daughter needed me to appear to be. I keep both. Not every betrayal needs to be forgotten in order to be survived. Sometimes the record protects the lesson from becoming a vague family story in which everybody was confused and nobody chose anything. I was not confused. Beth was not confused. She knew I was on the platform. I knew I was still capable of choosing a route. That morning, she took the train I paid for. I took the journey that remained mine. The Railroad's Fraud Review produced one more piece of information 3 weeks later. Customer service had not canceled the wrong passenger by accident. The agent who handled Beth's call questioned the request twice. According to the recording, Beth said I had developed sudden balance problems and was embarrassed to admit I could not manage the train. She said removing me quietly would protect my dignity. That invention hurt differently from the financial part. Beth had not only taken my room, she created a frail version of me to make the transaction sound compassionate. I asked to hear the recording. The fraud investigator warned that it might be upsetting. I listened anyway. Beth's voice was calm. She sounded responsible and slightly burdened. My mother gets stubborn when she feels people are treating her like she's old. She told the agent, if you contact her, she'll insist on traveling and could get hurt. The agent asked for medical documentation. Beth said the family was still waiting for it. Then she shifted from cancellation to a voluntary preference not to travel, which required no medical record. She knew how to move through objections. That was her professional skill. Hearing it used against me made my skin cold. The investigator offered to flag Beth's profile for suspected account misuse. I agreed. The railroad restored my canceled points and issued a written apology, even though its agent had followed the information provided. I did not ask for additional compensation. I asked for one operational change. When a lead passenger removes the person whose payment method covers the booking, the payer should receive an immediate notice. 6 months later, the railroad added a payment owner alert to its reservation system. It was not named after me. Good policies do not need memorial plaques. Beth learned about the recording during our second meeting. We were in a counselor's office because our first conversation at the station cafe had answered facts but not trust. The counselor asked Beth to repeat what she told customer service. Beth could not. I don't remember the exact words, she said. I had brought the transcript. I did not slide it across the table immediately. First, I asked whether she believed I had balance problems. No. Did she believe I was unable to travel? No. Had I ever asked her to manage my transportation because I was confused? No. Only then did I give her the page. She read silently. I was trying to avoid questions, she said. You used the cultural script most likely to silence questions. An older woman who does not understand her limits. I didn't think of it that way. You work in communications. You thought about exactly which story would work. The counselor did not rescue either of us from the silence. Beth eventually said, "You're right." That admission became the real beginning of repayment. Money returned monthly. Trust returned in smaller units. She asked before adding my name to school pickup forms. She stopped telling relatives I had decided something before I spoke. When she wanted me to watch the children for a weekend, she gave me the dates, the reason, and room to refuse. The first time I said no, she did not negotiate. I hung up afterward and cried harder than the situation deserved. It was not the request. It was the evidence that she could hear no without rearranging reality. My Denver detour also changed me in ways unrelated to Beth. Ruth and I had known each other since our first railroad training class. For 15 years, we exchanged Christmas cards and postponed visits. We assumed friendship could be stored like luggage in a station locker, waiting for the correct future day. During those 4 snowy days, we talked about widowhood, retirement, and all the invitations we declined, because family calendars seemed more important. Ruth confessed that she had almost stopped inviting me. You always had a grandchild event, she said. There were many events. There will always be events. She was right. After returning home, I began accepting one trip each year that had nothing to do with children. Ruth and I visited Quebec City. I traveled alone to Seattle. I joined a rail history group for a weekend tour of restored stations. My family did not lose me. They lost their monopoly on my availability. That difference made our time together better. When Lily turned 14, she asked for a train trip instead of a birthday party. Beth called me before promising anything. The 3 of us planned 2 nights in Washington. Each traveler had a separate ticket attached to the same itinerary. Beth paid her portion. I paid mine and Lily's as a birthday gift. At Albany Station, Beth stood still for a moment beside the track where she had left me years earlier. I think about that morning every time I come here, she said. So do I. I wish I could take back the wave. You cannot. She nodded. I know. Then she did something better than asking me to erase it. She picked up my bag and asked whether I wanted help carrying it. I said yes. She carried it onto the train and waited while I chose where to put it. The gesture was small enough that nobody else noticed. Repair often is. During the journey, Lily sat between us in the cafe car and asked how her mother and I became so careful about reservations. Beth answered, "Because I once changed Grandma's ticket without permission, and it hurt her." No mention of confusion. No softened, passive voice. Lily looked at me. "Is that the trip where you went to Denver?" "Yes." Aunt Ruth has the funny sign in her house. Ruth had framed Joanne's unscheduled life. The story had traveled into family, memory, but not as a vague accident. It retained choices, consequences, and the possibility of a different route. That was all I wanted from remembering it. Not a permanent trial, a reliable map. The old paper tickets from my honeymoon are stored in an album now. Beside them sits the canceled digital itinerary from Beth's trip and the boarding pass from my unexpected flight to Denver. 3 journeys occupy those pages. The first was chosen with my husband. The second was altered without me. The third began because I refused to let somebody else's choice become my destination. Every time I turn the page, I hear Leon tapping his ticket punch against his palm. The sound reminds me that permission is not sentiment. It is the small, exact mark that tells the journey who is allowed to go.